This week, Pastor Dan began a series on the book of Esther. And if you haven't read Esther chapter 1, you should take a look at it. It's this crazy description of this kingdom and this king throwing a party and all of this. And take a read through it if you haven't done so already. And so today, Pastor Rob and I want to talk to you about two parts of reality: the visible and the invisible. We're going to talk about the invisible stuff because that's the stuff that tends to get lost in the midst of discussing what's real. So first of all, we have the visible stuff, all right? But when we say the visible stuff as what's real, that can get confusing because it makes it seem like the invisible isn't real. So for the visible, let's say the physical are the things that have matter, right? Our senses are designed to pick up on all of this stuff, and so it preoccupies our attention.
And then we have the invisible stuff. That's the stuff that we usually call spiritual. And I think we also get confused by that word because we hear the word spiritual and we think something that's religious. What we mean by spiritual is spirit, which is something that doesn't consist of the matter of this world. So when we talk about Esther and we say there's two realities going on, we're talking about the real reality that it describes in the book of Esther in that first part that we were talking about, but then also this other reality, this spiritual reality, the stuff that we can't sense with our fingers, the stuff that we can't hear, taste, touch, that kind of stuff. We would call that spiritual. So it's not religious, it just is that there's another reality going on.
So we're down here by the river to teach two helpful points about the invisible, aka the spiritual. So take a look at this piece of ice. Now, as you look at it, how would you describe it? Shiny, sharp, kind of spiky, but you can't see that it's cold. You don't have the sense from where you're sitting there to actually sense that it's cold. You can't tell that my fingers right now are burning and getting numb. That's not a sense that you can see through the camera. That sense is not available to you. But trust me, it's cold.
Not only can you not sense the cold, but even if Dave was to describe it for you, you really don't know what he's talking about. Let me prove that to you. Dave, I want you to describe for our students, what does that feel like? And you can't use the word cold because remember, they don't know what cold is or anything around cold. You just gotta go, what is it? I'm just gonna talk a long time. That way you can really experience what you're feeling.
Yeah, I feel that.
What do you feel? Explain to them, what does cold feel like?
It feels bitey. It feels ouchy. It feels burny, numbing. It hurts.
Okay. So he could be talking about a lot of things. He could be talking about hot for all we know. We would say that hot is ouchy, it hurts. He could be holding a handful of tacks. My point is even as he explains to you what he's feeling, without you actually being able to touch it yourself, you actually have no idea. You just sort of have this general area that he's talking about.
So let's read in Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 to 17. It reads like this: The Son, meaning Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So Jesus is the one, and track with us on this, Jesus is the one who is able to help us experience and be able to see what is invisible. He is the one where the invisible and the visible collide. And you can read about this in the Gospels, where he healed people, he cast out demons, he performed miracles, and you have this collision of the invisible crashing into the visible. It's amazing.
So this illustration is a little bit weird, but I wanted to show it to you because I think it will help you understand what we're trying to talk about. So this is my Jetboil, and this thing is pretty cool. It can boil water in like less than a minute. I use it all the time for coffee. Here, check this out. Right in it, yeah. All right, check this out. That I got this weird habit, and I love the feeling of just burning my fingers in boiling water. And I don't know why I do it, but every day I put my fingers in, and I get them really, really warm. I love how it feels, and like it starts to sort of numb after a while. I lose the senses. Now, imagine I did this every day because I just loved it so much, and every day I lost a little bit more senses in my fingers until eventually I had nothing. So I can't feel anymore because I had this bad habit, this sin, if you will, of always dipping my fingers into the boiling water. Now, I want you to imagine if I was to pick up a piece of ice like this, so the same piece of ice Dave had, and I was to look at it and interact with it, I would notice the same things Dave noticed, what it looks like, it's shiny, things like that, but the whole time I'm interacting with it, I would never be able to feel the cold. I would never be able to experience it because of my habit, because of my sin. I would lose the sense of touch, and I wouldn't know that this is cold. And then also imagine that everybody has the same habit as I do. The Bible talks about everybody sinning. So say everybody had the habit of boiling water where they put their fingers in, and we all sort of passed around a chunk of ice, and we all looked at it, and we could not experience the cold. We could see everything else, but we did not have the sense of touch because of the issues that we had with boiling our fingers. Let's take it another step further and imagine that all of us, without the sense of touch, without the sense of being able to feel, we, as a big community, engage with winter. We would learn something really quickly, but we wouldn't understand what's going on. So we would know that as people went outside on a cold winter day, I guess we wouldn't know it's cold, some of them wouldn't come back. They'd be out there, they're like stiff on the sidewalk, they'd be dead. And we would look at them and go, without being able to sort of sense what the real problem is, we would have to sort of make some judgments. We would look around and go, you know what? Most of the time when people freeze, there's a lot of snow around them. So we might say, you know what? We got to be careful because snow kills people. Or we might go, you know what? It's not snow. It might be just the color white. Because every time we saw someone dead in a field, they were surrounded by white. So we might have these warnings that we explain to each other for people to avoid the color white, because often when you're around white, you'll get stiff and you die. Or we might look at the trees and all the leaves being off of them, and how when we tend to be in that situation of being dead outside, there's also a correlation with the fact that there's no trees, or there's no leaves on the trees. And we might come up with some theory that says that humans need to survive with leaves, that if there's no leaves on trees, there's a good chance that you might die. My point is, we'd be looking at the wrong thing. We would have to, without that sense, we wouldn't be able to gather what the real cause was. Now, our sin habits in real life do the same thing. They make it so we can't sense the spiritual, and so we don't factor that in. So we look around in our life and we try and make sense of what's going on with the things that we can see. So for example, we've got God telling us again and again that if we were to sin, we would die. But we don't see how that connects. We don't see on the spiritual side what's going on there. And so we kind of go, you know what, we sin all the time and we don't die. What we will look for then as we die is we point to different things. We don't point to sin. We point to things like sick. We point to things like people got old. We point to things like people are really mean, and sometimes there's wars. But we don't do the tie back because we can't actually sense what sin does when God says it kills us.
So in the first chapter of Esther, we have this story, and there's a whole bunch of things that are happening all in the physical realm. But not once does the king or the queen speak to in any way anything in the invisible realm that is influencing the physical realm. Next week, we're going to speak more to how the invisible plays out in the story of Esther. But for now, for today, we want you to understand this.
First of all, we want you to know that physical and spiritual are both real. Physical, we just have the senses to pick it up, and the spiritual is just invisible. It just means that we don't have the sense to pick it up. But we want you to get that they're both real.
We want you to get that knowing Jesus is the way to gain an understanding and a sense for the invisible. Jesus had such a strong sense of the spiritual realm, the unseen, invisible realm. He did this all the time.
And finally, we want you to get that sin is what breaks down your sense of being able to sense God or be able to sense the spiritual. So it's the sin that we do, it's our habits. That's what makes it so that we can't feel anymore, kind of like the fingers in boiling water. I wanted to ask you this question. What happens if the invisible actually plays a bigger role in our lives than we think it does? Is it possible that since we don't sense it, we come up with other explanations? Maybe that's what Paul is talking about. And I want you to think about this as we close this video with you guys. Maybe this is what Paul's talking about. In 1 Corinthians 3:18-20, let no one deceive himself. If anyone is among you says that he is wise in this age, let him become a fool, that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness for God. For it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, that the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, and that they are futile.
And now, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn toward you and give you his precious peace. In Jesus' name, amen.